He was in the field when the network went dark. The mission was still on and nobody was coming to fix it. 9 years, U.S. Army Special Forces, Green Beret, 7th Group. His job was more than the fight. It was to keep the teams connected when everything around them was designed to cut that connection off. Think jamming, detection, denied terrain. He built for the worst day because the worst day always showed up. Since hanging up the beret, he's driven over $1 billion in defense technology growth. And this year he founded Executive LLC, built on one belief. The standard on the battlefield doesn't drop when you walk into the boardroom. In fact, it becomes your edge. Ryan Garay, fight or flight. Let's go. Ryan, brother.
How you doing?
I'm good. It's fucking great to have you, man. And I did use the F-bomb, but we're going to keep it real. Welcome to Fight or Flight, and I am stoked to have you here, man.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is huge.
Of course. Time is valuable to everyone, and I appreciate you spending your time with us today, and I'm excited to get into the conversation. So let me dive right into it. 3 questions, no right order. Tackle them in any way you want. Who are you? Who have you been? And who are you becoming?
All right, good question. Solid. So, all right, I'm going to start with who was I? So I grew up in Connecticut, normal family, middle class, my mom, my dad, my younger brother. I wasn't good in school. I think that's important to point out. You know, I had all the capabilities to succeed. I was smart enough. I just didn't have any desire or drive, right? But sports made sense to me. I played everything, you know, hockey, basketball, football, soccer, weightlifting. It didn't matter. It was that competitive nature, the physical aspect, you know, it always appealed to me, but it was the camaraderie too and the team culture that I always loved and was drawn to, right? But direction in school as far as, you know, academically, I just didn't have a desire, at least at the time. Looking back, I'm not really sure what happened, right? But after high school, that's when I decided to join the military. So I always wanted to join the military, always had it in the back of my head. I mean, I was playing like Army Man when I was like 2 years old outside and freezing cold, you know, always loved it. Never came from a military family though, which, you know, was strange, right? To a lot of folk. Plus coming from Connecticut, not many people join the military from Connecticut for the most part. But I decided to join. It was the right time. My parents were not on board. I knew they weren't on board. Tried to have that conversation. So chose to not have that conversation. I basically went to the recruiter on my own. I got the contract on my own, signed up on my own, went to MAPS, swore in, locked it in. And then I came home and I told my parents, I said, listen, I'm going to try to be a Special Forces Green Beret in the Army. I joined, can't get out now. And I'll be going to Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training in 2 months. That was August 2010. They were shocked. And maybe I was a little upset at first, but like within a couple of days, they couldn't be more proud. Like they were so excited and supportive. You know, they're just worried for me. You know, it was wartime, but they couldn't have been more supportive, which was great. You know, so from then on, you know, the story writes itself. You know, I went to basic, I went to airborne, I went to Fort Bragg for the qualification course. After about a year and a half, I graduated as Green Beret. And then I was sent to my base of duty, right? And that was 7th Special Forces Group in Florida. Best group there is for us, Special Forces. I was on ODA 7234 and better known as America's premier Halo team. So it's pretty awesome. And like people, you know, a lot of people, they look at, you know, Green Berets or SEALs and they say, you know, an operator, shooter. I was a shooter. I was an operator for sure. But there's 12 men on an ODA and my specialty was communications, right? So when there was anything to do with radios, networks, cables, antennas, even, you know, TVs or laptops, right? It was my jam. I had to do it, right? And ultimately, it's the backbone of any mission. So when that fails, you know, you're in a ton of shit, right? And it was my responsibility to basically, for lack of a better term, unfuck it, right? Yeah, it's a huge responsibility to take on, especially as a junior guy in an ODA full of senior leaders. And it changed me. It changed me for the better. You know, I had to adapt fast. You know, they say that in combat, like you rise to the occasion, right? You don't, but you fall back on your preparation. And, I think that's incredibly true, right? So as a team, we did tons of rehearsals, as you could imagine, right? Contingency planning, con out planning. Um, but I think most importantly, we upheld the standards of a Green Beret, right? To ourselves and to our teammates, because, you know, being a Green Beret is an incredible privilege. And the most important part of that brotherhood is upholding the standards, right? And by doing that, you'll be successful, right? As an individual, as a teammate, as a operational detachment force, right? So, but there was a quote I heard early in the military career that I loved, right? And it was from my basic training instructor, who actually was a Green Beret. He said, "Always do the hard right over the easy wrong." And it's a simple quote, but like it just really hit me hard. And it's just so simple to follow. And I've always leaned on that, I love it. But
That's fantastic.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I even actually have a tattoo of it, funny enough. But I mean, it's simple, stupid, but it's easy to remind yourself of that daily, just to do the right thing, and it's the right way forward. So that preparation,
That's awesome.
and planning, yeah, it was always important on my team. It was primary number one, right? So like we trained incredibly hard at home, right? So that when we were deployed, everything came a little bit easier, right? And it was that muscle memory that kicked in. But as as a civilian, but even in the military, life doesn't just test you on the battlefield, right? So, after my last deployment, it was 2016. I transferred to Fort Bragg. I had to go to Fort Bragg to be an instructor in the qualification course for the future Green Berets, which was a great privilege all the same, but I did miss being on a ODA at 7th Group. But at that time, I was going through a divorce and I had no kids at the time. And, it shakes anybody's foundation, right? So like at the time, it affected me, I think, more than I let it be known, even to myself. But, internally, I was fighting a lot of demons, right? But externally, everyone saw that I was thriving, and I was on paper, right? But it's not an easy thing to go through, right? So fast forward a couple of months, basically 6 months before I transitioned out of the military, and that was 2019. I happened to meet the love of my life, Fort Bragg of all places, right? And I remarried, and she's incredible. She's my current wife. But it's 2019. I'm about to leave the military, right? And I'm stepping away from like the only identity that I ever known that I created, because what I was before the military, I was a little scattered. I was all over the place. I didn't find myself. In the military, I found myself, right? And that was my identity. So when I got out, and it was 2019, I was also not just getting out and transitioning. I was starting a new marriage, a relatively new relationship. And when we married 3-4 months after I met her, I was starting a new career, or finding a new career. And we were trying to start a family, which, you can imagine has its own, problems and trials and tribulations you go through as well. It's not always so easy. So everything changed at once. It was a lot to handle, but, what can you do? I just drove forward. I think that brings me to like who I am. Who am I now? All right. So basically, I'm still the same guy, right? I really same personality, haven't changed. My friends will say it. My family will say it. Good and bad. The bad stuff I try to improve on, but different uniform than I wore in the military for sure. But I still hold myself to those same high standards. That Green Beret mentality, right? And today I work in the defense sector at an amazing tech company. And, we specialize in leading communications technology for drones, for UGVs, for operators, that provide basically resilient communications, interoperable communications in those contested environments. So I'm actually supporting the operators in a different capacity, but like with leading technology, and it brings me an incredible amount of joy. I love my job, right? But most importantly, I'm a husband, right? And that's important to me. I'm a father to an amazing 5-year-old son. He is the absolute light of my life, right? And my family's everything. So truly everything that I do and I strive to achieve, it's because of my family, right? But an important thing that I realized about myself, actually, and this is not till after I got out, and I really did a lot of self evaluation and, looking internally, right? And I found out, a lot of high performers, especially in the military, right, were wired a certain way, right? We'll hit a goal and then we'll immediately raise that bar. Well, it's never enough. We're never satisfied. So we're always chasing that shiny object, we'll say, right? And we're always capable of more. We never quite feel like we arrived. It's that imposter syndrome. I think I've always had that. And, what resonated with me a lot is what psychologists will say these days, and I hear it on these podcasts, is you look at like the billionaires in the world, these extremely innovative entrepreneurs, successful people. They have three traits that I think I fall into with a lot of other military members I've worked with. Number one is you always think you deserve a little bit more than other people, right? Number two, you never feel like you're enough. And number three, you've got a crazy drive to succeed. So you combine all those things and you know how to harness it, you've got a recipe of success, but you got to be able to harness that energy and momentum. But I got incredibly high standards of myself, just like other military members I serve with, especially in the soft community. But you could definitely get burned out if you're not tracking appropriately and you're kind of constantly checking yourself, right? But those kind of traits do sharpen you, right? But yeah, in the past, I wanted to be better for my team. That was priority one. But now I want to be better for my family. I want to be better for myself. That's my goal. So at the end of every day, it sounds like cliche or whatever, but I truthfully do this. End of every day, I ask myself, did I do better today? Did I achieve what I said I was going to do? So, if the answer is yes, then I won for that day. I can check that box. I can go forward. But it's one day at a time for me. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and look at the long road, But what taught me, what I learned in the military, and I kind of do it on the BD side in different capacity, but in the military, they always said, start small. So if you got to understand your baseline, your strategic goal, right? That's your 100-meter target. And then you got to calibrate it down. You got to hit that 5-meter target first, work to that 10 and 15. You may have to adjust firing along the way. Capture those small targets and work towards that ultimate goal that you're trying to succeed. That's the only way to do it.
Hey, man, this is great. Great feedback. I got a really clear understanding, high achiever, little uncertainty getting into it, many kids coming out of high school, trying to figure out what's next. You pursued the best of the military in your specific discipline and excelled with that. And so that's epic. As 15 years straight is pretty remarkable. Thank you for your service and for the training that you gave back to others. Really clear who you're becoming. And we'll get into that in the podcast in a little bit more detail. Love that your family's top priority, and that expresses a value-based approach to what you do. I want to pivot for a minute and come back to something you said, which was rise to the occasion, fall back to the greatest level of planning.
Yeah.
And I recognize that everyone has a plan until the first issue, whether it's a bullet or a punch or a financial problem, hits you hard and the whole thing goes sideways. And then you're going, well, now what? Can you walk me through a moment in the field, combat or training, where the plan collapsed the second you made contact, and what did you actually do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all goes down to, planning, preparation, training, especially in the military, and then everything becomes a muscle memory movement, right? And it's whether you're clearing a house or you're just conducting a regular mission. But when I was in Afghanistan and, we were, at a base overlooking, the operational area that we were going to be conducting missions on later that evening. We were on the rooftop and we were, scoping out, the trajectory. And ultimately we saw, obviously enemy in the distance, but then all of a sudden there was a shot that was cracked. And one of my teammates were shot by a sniper, and we weren't planning for that. No, I mean, nobody was even tracking that would even be a possibility at the moment, at that part of the day, in that situation on that rooftop. And, we had to adjust fire very quickly. And the base security went up, the QRF went out. We were able to get our guy to the helicopter immediately and get a medevac. And he was all right. And thank God he was. I mean, he got so lucky. The sniper shot ricocheted off the building, and it hit him about a half an inch under his plate carrier, which sucks, right? And it got so close to his spine that he would have been definitely handicapped if it went like a millimeter further. So it was just an incredible amount of luck, and thank God he's okay. He's still operational. He's working still in that field, doing a lot more sensitive missions at the time. So he's a real pipe hitter. And but that was a time when nobody prepared for it. But let me tell you, the way that everybody kind of just immediately jumped and shifted to what they knew they had to do as a team, but individually, I mean, everything was just locked down within the first 5 minutes. It was really great to see. And that just because of the training that we could fall back on, the muscle memory.
Well, let me ask a question about muscle memory.
Yeah.
Does there come a point financially, emotionally, professionally, when even the deep conditioning isn't enough, when you have to find something else? And what is that something else that you have to find?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, especially, I mean, in the military is one thing, but on the corporate side, in the sector I'm in now, it's a whole different battlefield to traverse, right? It's companies, it's priorities, it's different people, different personalities, different loyalties and goals in mind. And like, I don't think you're ever really safe, and you need to understand that. Shit can definitely always go wrong. So what's priority one is protecting yourself and protecting your family, right? Whether it's physical security or financial security. And I don't think you can be 100%, sure you're always going to be able to avoid. You have to plan for the conflict or the hardship that is definitely going to come, and be well prepared. And I think it's not so much, I think it's having the right mindset that when something does go wrong, you don't, shrink. You don't wallow down and let the bad stuff kind of take over you. Like immediately you should be, okay, what do I got to do? Where do I have to look? How can I get us out of this hole, either for myself or for my family? And yeah, I think it's a personality thing. I think it's a situational thing, just a situational awareness thing internally that I think people need to work on and master. I mean,
that's great.
Yeah.
I want to circle back a little bit later to mindset versus perspective, but I want to stay with the plan meeting the contact. And you brought up muscle memory, and we talked a little bit about the conflict. During times of hard pivot, sniper, got to readjust, military to civilian, even when you were training new cadets to become operators. You use the word pre-planning, you use the word prioritization, I use the word follow-through. You have a vernacular, but it means the same thing. In a hard pivot, are they weighted equally, or does one carry more weight in that process, the pre-planning, the prioritization, and the follow-up, than others?
I think it depends on what we're talking about and the mission in general. I mean, there's different parts of the planning process, right? So like planning on an ODA, at home before you deploy is a whole different thing than planning once you're on the ground. I mean, if we're talking about specifically on the ground, it's rehearsals. It's, understanding the route that we're going on the mission, the things that can go wrong. What if this happens? What if that happens? Communications always ties into a huge factor, right? I mean, all the equipment, the weapons, we test, 2, 3, 4 times before we go out the door, if we're able, It's all about repetitions. It's about constantly checking. How many times we've probably, changed batteries on, sites our weapons or batteries on our radios, even when we didn't have to, because you need to be completely fully prepared, right? So there's different levels of preparation and planning based on the stage of the mission you're at. But I think it's incredibly important to, as part of that, to remember that the after action report is equally important. So once you conduct your mission, or even on the civilian side, once something goes wrong or it goes right, it's important to look back at yourself or your team you're working with and say, this is what we did right, this is what we did wrong, this is what we need to change. And then actually, have do outs as an individual or a team and track that, so that next time you have a mission, next time you have an opportunity, and you're doing that preparation and you're planning, you can implement the information that you gathered in that previous AAR, so that the same stuff doesn't happen over and over again. Because people, I don't think, do that enough, and that's how they repeat their failures over and over again.
So let's apply this to strictly civilian, commercial business. The military has got a regiment and a fellowship and a shared purpose. In business, that can be driven by different motivations, both
100%.
internal and external, personal and team oriented. So, later we'll get into the team, and I want to ask questions about that. But we're talking about behavioral blueprints right now. So my question here is really related to the process, and what part of that pre-planning, prioritization, and follow-up is more important, or said differently, where in civilian business do you find it deficient and an opportunity for the most advancement?
Yeah, it's a completely different landscape to navigate on the commercial side, on industry. So it really comes down to personnel. I mean, what I've found, to be honest, is, and it took me a while to understand this in a few different companies to work at, but culture, when companies say, this is our culture, this is why it's important, we want to see if you're the right fit. Culture is everything, but culture should be really focused on individual loyalty to themselves, trustworthiness, true collaboration internally as a company to grow. What I've found is that there's a lot of individuals on the commercial industry side that work for these large companies, and they're checking the box for themselves, and they're trying to play the game the best they can. And it may seem like it's a collaborative process to grow the company, to promote the effort, but it's not always that way. I found this to be a little bit more in large companies than small companies. So to me, the biggest change that I saw is, colleagues that you work with, they don't have the same personality as the people that I went into the military with and served with, right? I could 100% trust the people that I went on missions with, right? I knew that. I mean, it's not like I want to highlight this, but if we went out to the bar together and there was an incident and somebody swung at me, I guarantee you I would have my team swinging at them before I could even swing myself. That means something, and in on the industry side, for the most part, what I've found is everybody's out for themselves, and everything's a stepping stone. And that camaraderie, that culture, that loyalty that you think you're going to have, that you had in the military, you just may not have all the time on the industry side in the corporate world. So you need to be very diligent and knowledgeable of this, so that you could play the game in a different capacity. Military folk always say, play the game. It means something different on the corporate side. Understand your surrounding, understand your operational environment, your organizational environment, understanding what's going to be best for you, your team, your company. But ultimately, you are an individual in a large, you're a spoke on a wheel. You know what I'm saying? It's a little different than being on an ODA.
No, I totally appreciate it. What you're hitting on is the difference between mindset and perspective. The mindset being a fixed set of beliefs that shapes your worldview, and the perspective really being the view of a specific situation and your vantage point. I like the way you reframe that for us, and I recognize that you are an individual that wants to achieve individually and as a team. So whatever culture you're a part of, you're pushing your values forward for the absolute best possible. And I also recognize that identity changes under different pressure, and one's self-awareness and one's situational awareness. So the question that I lean into is one that I've shared with many operators that have either transitioned to the civilian life or in the process of it. I mean, that is, when you left the special forces, what were you most afraid of losing? Not professionally, but personally.
I would definitely say it's identity. I mean, whatever I did, whoever I hung out with, even, family, friends, it was all that community, right? It was the military community, and leaving it and not being a Green Beret anymore. I don't know. I mean, what do you do? If I didn't go the route that I went and I maybe started my own business and did something completely different, it would have been great. But I think I was scared of losing that identity. So I subconsciously already knew that I wanted to go into a field that I could still be part of the community, right? Which ultimately it's what I wanted to do. It worked out for the best. But I had some self-awareness that, hey, I'm losing who I was so proud of what I was for so long. And is it the right time? Am I making the right choice?
It's so remarkable. I have a colleague. He is very senior, currently active in the Pentagon and retiring at the end of March. And we had a meet maybe 8 months ago as he was prepping for his transition. And there was a sense of insecurity in the conversation. And I looked at him like, bro, you're freaking Superman. Like, he's deals with trauma, deals with triage in the medical and in first line of combat. And I'm like, do you not see what I see? Now, I recognize stepping out and going into a new world, i.e. vocabulary, may be daunting, but what you've done perils in comparison to what I do. And yet you're bringing to me this concern. And I was high-fiving him for the vulnerability, because we could we could situationally address a problem and break it down for him. But it was quite remarkable that my perspective of the strengths and the attributes were remarkably different than his self-awareness, which got me thinking about all the hacks. What are the hacks that I could help my buddy go through? And I was going through the list, the box breathing, the cold showers, the journaling, all these tools. And I'm like, you know what? I think they're a big old head fake, because they're not helping the belief from within him. And I'm curious as to how you manage the pressure and how you metabolize that change. And if there was one foundational thing that helped you hold it all together when all the other stuff wasn't working, what would that be and why?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love everything you said. Ultimately for me, I didn't have all the tools that I wish I had. I have never been a person to reach out to people, not because of my ego. I am far from an egocentric guy. I always know that there's somebody better, there's somebody worse than me, but I just never wanted to burden people with my issues. And I've always been self-reliant. So when I transitioned, I was incredibly nervous. I was scared. Do I have the tools? Do I have the right personality traits? Am I equipped to succeed on the outside? And I stumbled, and, I built my resume. I did what I did. But if I reached out to a mentor or had some help, it could have put me in the right direction, because just like your friend, I have met tons of individuals, like incredible individuals. The other day, I talked to and helped this individual, 20 years plus in service as a SEAL, finished at DevGru his last 6-7 years. I mean, he's got like a bachelor's, an MBA in business, and it's like he was reaching out to me. I never met him before on LinkedIn, and he just said, "Hey, what you've achieved is phenomenal. I don't know how you've done it. Can you help me? I'm transitioning in 6 months." And I loved it. I want to help in any way I can, because I think that if I had somebody help me the way that I've helped some of these individuals, instead of taking this long to get to where I've gotten and deal with a lot of like trials and tribulations and some hardship and some failures, if I can streamline the process for these individuals, because I think it's self-awareness is everything, right? These incredibly talented professional leaders with an exceptional set of skills that most people in the world just don't have, they don't see it. They've been indoctrinated to this military culture. They have been used to getting a paycheck. They never had to deal with layoffs. They had steady promotions if they did the right thing. It's completely different. So I want to shed light on what they're capable to achieve and what their future could look like. And once I kind of can shine that light and open those doors for them, everything changes. So like this person I just spoke about, this SEAL, I worked with him for like 6 months, kind of helped him with his resume, how to interview, who to apply to, little things like that. And ultimately, he just landed his first six-figure job as a BD at a tech company right after he's going to be getting out. So it's phenomenal. I mean, long story short, these guys, I'm telling you, they just have the most A-type personality for the most part, with all the right skills to succeed, but they just lack the internal, I don't know if I can do it, because they don't know what's possible,
Yeah, it's interesting. I reflect on that, and I recognize within them super achievement. And then I break it down to a more practical conversation that I have is what's threatening to them, the lack of access or the sense that there's a lack of opportunity when they step out from their specific team. And I don't have an answer to that. I'm really exhausted over the conversation of build your network and pull your tribe in. And, I believe it's a matter of finding the smallest group of people that you can trust to give you an honest assessment of where you are and what you're capable of doing, and then to leverage the people that they know to make introductions, and that it all starts in just hand-to-hand combat. And what I mean by that is shake a hand in person, not over the phone or by text, and or target an area of interest. If it's woodworking, if it's brew mastering, if it's business development, BD, whatever it is, hone into that and leverage that, because your first step may not be the career path, but it is positive inertia. You're moving the ball down the field. And I appreciate the way you approach it and what you're doing to help others, which I want to get into in a moment. Question for you.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about helping others, and I recognize what you're doing. Everyone says your tribe will carry you, but some tribes have ulterior motives. I call them the wolf in the network.
Yeah.
In the veteran and defense community, it's super tight. You've had a long time in theater. You know exactly what moves and motivates people. But what is the calculus when you get into the civilian sector and business, and you recognize that some people are not necessarily motivated by the end goal, but by financial achievement or by personal promotion? How do you build a community with intentionality? How do you filter those people with ulterior motives from those that don't align with the team play?
I think truthfully, it's a sad truth, and it's my opinion. I think you have to, once you transition out of the military, let's say, and then you're in the civilian world, you need to be incredibly self-reliant. You need to know that nobody's coming to save you. Nobody cares more about you than you're going to care about yourself and your family. Like, you have to break down very clearly, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your family? Know that you can achieve it and rely solely on yourself. I've never had anybody that I depended on to make something happen. I'm not saying don't leverage your network. Leverage your network to the best of its ability. Reach out to the closest friends, mentors, maybe family members to provide guidance, direction, insight, introductions. I say throw as many lines of effort out as possible, right? Because a lot of people are very scared to, make that first step or put out that introduction or try to put yourself out there. That's where they fail. Just throw them out there, and see what lands and see what makes sense. But at the end of the day, I think people need to have that mindset, especially in this corporate industry world, that you are by yourself. You are that lone wolf. You may work for your company and the culture might be phenomenal, but at the end of the day, everybody's got a boss. Everybody's got a budget. Every company has a motive. And you need to protect yourself. And if there's something that you want in this world, you have to rely on yourself. And in the military, it's very easy to rely on, lean on other people. If you were deployed, and your friend wasn't, maybe he was back at home, helping your family out, whether it's mowing the lawn or something like that, small stuff like that. Or you could always lean on them and kind of have that true brotherhood, especially in the scenario and the environment and the workspace that you're in. But you're very much on your own. And it's not, I mean, it could sound like a bad thing. People could take that as, a depressing thing, but it's an empowering thing. Like you are the keys to your own success. If you fail, it's on you. Do you know?
I do. And in our earlier conversations, I want to preface your comments with something that you shared with me. When you say self-reliant and solo, I recognize that is suggesting that you're an absolute team player, whether it's in business development, but that it comes down to having very specific standards and goals, as you pointed out, of things that you want to personally achieve as adding value to the greater good, opposed to just sitting back and letting it happen. And in having that internal compass, both moral, value-based, as well as financial, because we're all here to add value to whatever we're doing, that moves you. And I think that's an important preface. As someone's listening to this, they're going, oh, this guy's coming in as a solo operator. That's not the case, and that's not what we're sharing with others.
No. But one thing that I do want to highlight too is standards, right? So I talked about in the military. You have standards internally and your team holds you to those standards and vice versa, right? In the corporate world, you'll join a company, let's say, and you think there's standards, right? You operate at a certain level. Let's say, you're incredibly diligent, you're organized, you're the first to respond to an email. You don't let things pile up. You don't miss meetings, right? If you think that everyone in the company or that you work with and collaborate directly with are going to they hold themselves to that high standard that you do, you're going to be let down. So you need to learn how to understand people's strengths, their weaknesses, how they work, how they interact, if you're going to collaborate with them on a daily basis. And you need to rely on yourself in the way that, let's say that if I know somebody has a problem, tracking upcoming opportunities or tracking events, and you need to ping them once or twice, that's on me. I put it on me. I don't put it on them anymore because I want to control the success of my team, right? So if I know that there's a weakness and it may just be a follow-up, from one individual, I don't mind. I set myself up a reminder to ping them, to follow up with them so we can move forward as a team. It's just, I think the standards are going to be different across the board than maybe what people are used to in the military. And you need to be able to adapt.
I appreciate that. So you have an internal standard and you have a team standard, and there's some metrics that report out on that, no different than in the military. It could be a quarterly goal. It could be a profit contribution, whatever it may be. But then there's also the internal, how many accounts can I funnel, so forth and so on. And you're talking about the military application in comms of jamming, detection, detention, degradation, all those things that you experience in the comms world are no different in the civ world. It's similar. The consequences may be different.
Yeah.
However, the practical side of it is still the same, which gets me to the great work you're doing with Operator to Executive. And that mission is absolutely continuing. Let's talk about that. What's the gap you saw? What's the gap you saw that no one else was seeing that you're closing in on? And if you could be specific, what were people getting wrong that you're able to help smooth over?
Yeah, so I started Operator to Executive recently, making it official. But I mean, I've been kind of doing this for 3 years. And it's not because I chose to do this or I came up with this great idea. And it's not that other people aren't doing something similar, which I definitely promote anybody doing anything like this for people transitioning or trying to move up in the corporate ladder, right? But ultimately, because of my LinkedIn, as it grew, as my career grew and changed, I went from one company to another company, and I worked and built my network, and I worked with different customers. And I started getting a lot of traction on LinkedIn. And from that, I had literally hundreds of individuals from the military reaching out to me over the last 3 years, just hitting me up, didn't even know them, saying, how did you achieve this? How did you land this job? I have a tech background like you. I came from this community. I'm transitioning in 6 months. I have no idea what to do. Do you got time for a quick call? and I always make time for a call.
Mm.
It's just been incredibly satisfying for me to be able to help these guys, because the questions, a lot of the answers that I provide are just so basic, in my opinion, because of what I've been through, but they're so incredibly useful to those individuals. Like if I had somebody like myself that was willing to spend a couple minutes and provide some time, with me in 2019, I could have avoided a lot of, different misdirection or small failures that could have streamlined my process to where I wanted to be, and these individuals, they just want to know. I think the biggest thing that they want when they reach out to me is they see what I achieved and they're like, is this possible for myself? And when I talk to these guys, no matter how senior leader they are and how much they've accomplished, I hear in their voice, they don't think it's possible. Or they're like, I didn't know this was possible. Could I do BD? Could I be this executive? Could I make this income for me and my family? And once I shed light on all of that for them, provide them some information, help them with some direction, whether it be resume building or interview prep, they have this spark. They have this drive that I bet they haven't had since they joined the military in their progression through their career. And it's just helped them incredibly well because they're able to identify clearly what they want for themselves in their second life outside the military. A lot of military members retire and they're fine with living off their pension and taking it easy, and more power to them. But I think a lot of individuals fall into that gap, and because they just don't know what to do and they don't have the direction, and ultimately it eats at them, right? Because these are A-type personality pipe hitters, and they need a reason to wake up in the morning, right? They need a reason and something to go do. And when you don't have that, you lose your identity and depression kicks in, bad thoughts kick in. Being idle is not where people like us should be. We're like sharks. We need to keep swimming, right? Or we die. So yeah, ultimately I just officially started the company, operated to executive, as I'm getting all these personal reach out and DMs, and it's just wonderful to be able to help at least here and there where I can. And what I do, I think the most for them is I show them an equally loyal, trustworthy, real person that they're used to who succeeded on the corporate side, because that's not always the case, right? It's a different, it's a different person, a different way of speaking. And I speak their language. I look like them, but I've accomplished X, Y, and Z. And
I think you're underselling yourself. I recognize that you give them that visual and moral support, but I also recognize that some of the services you are providing are cover letters, resumes, communications and follow-up notes, strategies on how to pinpoint an approach. No different than your business development. Who are the prospects? How do you build a funnel? And I know that you're applying those lessons learned from the military to your commercial to help others. 5 years from now, what does success look like for operator to executive?
Well, 5 years from now, I just hope that, it's growing exponentially and I'm able to help more individuals and, create more jobs. I mean, potentially even working directly with the military to help transition them early on stages that's funded through the military potentially, or, even more so, I see there's a huge room in the next couple of years to work directly with recruiting companies. So the defense technology field is booming, right? There can't be more money being thrown to it. Small companies, startups, large companies, they're all growing. So recruiters are getting these positions that they need filled, and they don't have the network. They don't have the background most of the time from the military perspective to what the defense company needs. So I see them in the future working with them closely to help fill direct job openings in the defense industry field.
Fantastic. So you are truly the switch, the calm switch, where you're connecting talent to purpose to end goal, whether that be a brand or a innovator or a community. So I appreciate that. I love the direction that you're moving. You're building a company to help others. And it's clear to me, I'm not going to ask why. It's clear that you're a value-based person. So big high five to you and your family for supporting this initiative. I appreciate that. And, grateful. Ryan, fabulous conversation. What's the one thing that you're expecting me to ask that I have not asked you yet?
I think we pretty much hit everything, I guess I could kind of end with a follow-on answer to the initial question you asked, who am I going to be? Like, where am I going to be? Not my company.
Please.
If that works.
Of course.
So I'm always going to be that guy who never stops working or being better or chasing that shiny object, like with my dad over Christmas, I told him, like, hey, Dad, this is what I'm going to do. At the end of the year, I'm going to get this, do this. And he's like, you're always doing something. And I'm like, yeah, I'm never done, But ultimately,
Nice.
my goal is to build a legacy, right? Where one day my son could be like, Dad did exactly what he said he was going to do and more. And he always showed up for me. That would mean everything to me, right? I was an operator, I was an ODA guy, but the best title I ever got or name, right, was Dad, right? And that's it means everything to me. And family and having a son definitely changed everything for me. But the battlefield has taught me, that how to operate under the pressure, right? But ultimately, life in general, it taught me over the last few years how to endure pressure and some hardship, because everybody's going to go through some shit, right? And some really bad times. But like I said earlier, faith, it teaches me how to walk through it with purpose, and I think that's key. And a mentor of mine once said, he was my team sergeant on 7234 and he passed away. But he said, success isn't an event. It's preparation meeting pressure. So when you build yourself correctly, pressure doesn't break you, right? It reveals who you really are. So it's a beautiful thing.
Ryan, thank you for that. This is exactly the kind of conversation I built this show to have. If someone would like to get in touch with you for consulting opportunity, for advice, to learn more about you, your background, and the services you're offering, how would you like one to go about doing that?
I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn for sure, Ryan-Garay-Lewis. And then you'll also see my company page as well, and they're Operator to Executive.
Awesome. Friends, family, and cohorts, our larger audience, if this conversation landed for you, if you're an operator in transition, if you're a leader who's questioning whether the standards you built in service still apply, or someone who's hitting the wall where the hacks aren't working, Ryan's work is the next step. We'd love for you to hit him up. Find him on LinkedIn, find Operator to Executive LLC. And if you know someone who needs this conversation, please share it with them, this episode, because people who need it the most are usually the ones who fail to ask for it. 3 questions and ask for the audience. Please subscribe. If this is your first episode, don't make it your last. Hit subscribe. The standard here never drops. Share it. There's got to be someone in your network who needs to hear this, needs to hear from Ryan. You know who it is. Get it out to them and connect. Again, Ryan Garay on LinkedIn, Operator to Excellent LLC. The mission resonates to me. Reach out to him. He's building something real. Brother Ryan, thank you. The standard remains the same, and this is our fight or flight. We'll see you next time, peeps.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.